All right, so I'm Tom McCain. I'm a retired chief deputy here in the state of Georgia, and just through a series of circumstances, I now run Peachtree NORML as the executive director. And I'm not even going to go into how I got here, because that's not what we're here about. So what we're here to talk about, and I'll let each one of these individuals introduce themselves, is the new Atlanta, what everybody called a decriminalization bill, but what is really a kind of a reclassification of it and taking it away from, taking it out of the category of an arrestable, jailable offense and putting it into a $75 ticket kind of with no jail time. That's the spirit of and actually the wording of the ordinance. So we have some folks from LEAP here, and LEAP is Law Enforcement Action Partnership, started off as Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, kind of had some policy change and structural change, and became Law Enforcement Action Partnership. So I'm going to let these folks introduce themselves, but first I'm also going to introduce, we have here Senator Harold Jones from the Augusta district, and he was the senator who submitted SB 105 last year, which is a state decriminalization where it reduces the fines, reduces penalties, where it's a ticketable offense, no jail time involved. And glad to have him on the panel. Thank you for being here. And Howard, if you want to just start with a little introduction, what you did as a cop and that kind of thing.
Howard Wooldrige, Fort Worth, Texas, retired detective, co-founder of LEAP, and the topic is basically what to do with a simple possession case of marijuana. And where I worked, and starting in 1974 in Michigan, we had what we call catch and release, which is cite and release, where you had a misdemeanor where you could either issue an appearance ticket, show up on Friday, 1 o'clock, and talk to the judge, or you could actually physically arrest them. I cut my teeth, and all the way through my 18 years in law enforcement, we did a catch and release. It worked very well. Almost everybody showed up on Friday. The most important thing for the audience to understand is this improves public safety, which should be our only goal, our only job, one, is public safety. I did not have to waste an hour and a half of my time and police time being out of service, being out of my district, taking somebody up to the jail, process the information, process the person, process the evidence, all of that, about an hour and a half's worth of work. I was ready for your 911 call when the bell rang. And cite and release on simple marijuana improve public safety. Thank you.
And as we get a little further into this, one of the reasons that I asked these folks, to be here for this is that in training classes around the state, APD, Atlanta Police Department officers are being asked, well, how are you guys going to treat this? What are you going to do? And most of them say, we're going to write them a ticket. It keeps us from going to court. And like Howard said, it really improves them. It improves public safety because they are back out on the streets quicker instead of having to take a book and all that. And so the discussion is going to kind of revolve around that, and the spirit of the legislation, of the ordinance, and just how this idea that some of them are out there saying, oh, we're still going to charge it under state law, plays into this. So, sorry about that.
So, anyway, thanks for having this, and thanks for having me here. I'm Neill Franklin. I'm the executive director of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, LEAP, and I'm from the state of Maryland. I've been in law enforcement for my career there for over 3 decades, 34 years. Everything from working undercover to commanding drug task forces, the head of training for the Maryland State Police, and then after that Baltimore City, and then went to a third police agency. And a lot of my career has either been in narcotics enforcement, criminal investigation, or training. And in 2010 I became the executive director of LEAP, and I'll just get right to what this is really about. and how this benefits community. And I think a lot of this, of what you spoke to, is about educating our police officers to the benefits of this type of policy change, and we don't do a very good job of that. Okay, we change a law, we change a policy, but we really don't educate. We may train police officers, but we don't educate them regarding the benefits of such a policy change. And that's one thing that we need to do. And the second thing is, as in police departments around the country, and it's not just to benefit in this area of decriminalizing possession of marijuana, but quota systems, whether it's a real number or whether it's a perceived number, to where we use the number of police arrests, because making a marijuana arrest is very, very easy. So you can make many of them rather quickly.
Right.
Whether it's making an arrest or writing a ticket, we need to move away from that type of matrix for evaluating performance of our police officers. We need to get into quality relative performance measures about how you're affecting your community in a positive way and interacting with the people in your community. And that's what we have to figure out and do. Regarding this piece of policy and moving forward on this, it's also a leadership issue, again. If the police leader, if the prosecutor's office has decided, along with the people and the elected officials, that this is what they want to do and where they want to go, then it's a leadership issue in getting the police officers to follow suit and not try to circumvent that policy. Again, if they're educated properly, I think that the average police officer, most police officers are going to say, oh wow, this is a good thing. It's a good thing for the community, it's a good thing for us, so that we can then focus our limited resources upon violent crime. I haven't met a cop yet that said they wanted to come into policing to arrest people for possessing marijuana.
Right.
They wanted to come into policing to deal with people who are hurting other people. Murders, rapes, robberies, crimes against our children. That's what it's all about. But unfortunately, the culture of policing as it's tied to drug enforcement policies and prohibition has how can I say, put many police officers in very difficult positions as it relates to the work that they do within their community. So that's my opening statement.
Thank you, Neill. Appreciate you. Okay. And, to give Chief Shields due credit, you're speaking about policy, she has already told us, and the numbers bear it out, that she has already deprioritized this because she does want to pay more attention to the violent crimes, to the homicide stuff. And apparently they're doing that because the numbers bear it out. In 2015, APD made 2,794 possession cases, marijuana possession cases. But in 2016, they only made 1,176. And out of those, only 438 were for just possession, and of course the others were locked into lay and drag in the middle of the street and not having a tag and running with a suspended license and then having a little weed in your pocket. Well, what do you expect? So really.
Well, then that's good leadership.
And that's good leadership.
That's before the policy.
That's right. Yeah. And that was it there again. That was even before the policy. So we've got to give her credit for her stance on it. As she made the public statement, I don't want people going to jail for a bag of weed. Yeah. So.
My name's Diane Goldstein. I'm a retired lieutenant commander from Redondo Beach Police Department in California. I spent almost 22 years in law enforcement, working mainly operational assignments. I started a school resource officer program, ran and worked our gang unit. As a sergeant, I was responsible for our special investigations unit, which was our career criminal narcotics unit. And then as a commander, I ran several divisions. And I want to speak to two issues and just validate exactly what Neill and Howard said, that this is a policy issue. And what I saw in my career is that the nature and culture of law enforcement is like moving the Titanic to avoid an iceberg. It is very slow, and we are seeing a huge shift, not just in public opinion, but also in law enforcement opinion. I believe this last year, one of the Pew Research or Brookings, I can't remember which it was, did the annual poll where they poll law enforcement agencies about what they do, what their priorities should be, how they feel about, use of force, and they polled the question about marijuana this year for the first time. And what you saw is you saw 1 in 3 or 2 out of 3 police officers basically saying, hey, we either need to legalize marijuana or they supported medical marijuana. So it was a really, really good poll for us because you see the changes government and politicians are very, as I call it sometimes, with all due respect, are behind the times relative to their constituents. And so sometimes, you're gonna see this lag. But what's going to happen, and I believe with good leadership, and it sounds like it's there, that the chief will put out direction and officers who deliberately intend to undermine the process, that then becomes a supervisor issue that is dealt with through discipline. So, but I also want to remind our law enforcement professionals, because I really truly believe that we are in fact a profession, is that we, just like the military, are unlike any other profession, is that we carry guns. We are the only people within our domestic borders that are allowed to make the decision to kill people. And because we carry those guns, we were deliberately placed into the executive branch of our government. And our jobs and our roles have never been to make laws or to undermine laws. Our role should be as service providers, at working with our constituents to enforce the priorities and the laws as our constituents wish. And so, it is, I understand people maybe grumbling and, trying to act kind of the law enforcement bravado of we're not going to do it, we don't care. Well, that's not really the case, and they're going to have to fall in line or they're going to face some significant consequences if they don't.
Thank you, Diane. And it's good to finally meet you after knowing you on Facebook for a couple of years. One of the things that when we're arguing with law enforcement about this, and folks with Peachtree NORML do argue with them about it a lot, because every time we see them posting a marijuana brag post, we go there and we notify, well, what we do first is we notify our members about it, and then our members go there and we kind of chastise them about marijuana and about the whole issue. And one of the things that they always tell us is, well, if you don't want us enforcing the law, then change the law. So what I have to say to the APD officers out here, kind of in general, and this is not anything, because look, I'm still a cop. You don't just, that doesn't just leave you, okay? I still think like a cop. I still talk like a cop, all right? So what I'm saying to you is this, and I'm not being derogatory to you in any manner whatsoever. We have changed the law, okay? Please live up to the spirit of that change. Don't try to skirt it. You told us to change it. You wouldn't enforce it. Well, we changed it. So let's go with that. Senator Jones, you're also a former prosecutor from the Atlanta district.
Augusta.
Augusta, I'm sorry. So what do you think about all this? I mean, you introduced legislation last year for decriminalization of it at the state level. We had success getting it out of the Judiciary Committee with bipartisan support. And and it just kind of stalled in rules. We're going to look at it again in the 2018 session. How do you feel like the Atlanta ordinance speaks to the legislator, the Georgia General Assembly?
It's a very good ordinance, and one of the things we have to start watching is that if we have our cities continually kind of change their laws, that we almost are going to be in a state with 2 different laws, because you have your consolidated counties, which cannot actually do what the cities are doing. So on one hand, you may have some of your larger cities changing, or even some smaller cities actually changing to do more, even though it's not pure decriminalization, but a change of how you prosecute marijuana. But then at the same time, you'll have larger counties, especially consolidated counties, that can't make those changes. So you almost have two different laws going on within the state. So I think in that sense, that should kind of spur us a little bit along to say, we kind of need to make these same kind of changes, which we have already started pushing. And one of the reasons why I pushed it as a former prosecutor was the fact that it would free up prosecutors as far as, you know, prosecuting cases, especially on misdemeanor levels where we get these cases. Our big area is really domestic violence.
Yep.
So that would actually free up us to be able to prosecute more domestic violence cases more effectively, to where we can actually work with defects and things of that nature, because domestic violence has, you know, such a long history, and it affects so many people in so many different ways. You know, when we start talking about, you know, prosecuting the simple marijuana cases, that's one thing. But with domestic violence, you realize that if a young boy or something like that sees his mother being beaten, he's going to be that much more prone to be somebody that does that. So we're talking about things that really have impact on person's lives. So what I've always looked at it is, by treating it more, even though it's not true decriminalization, in that one area alone is worth it, because then we can actually approach our DV cases from a holistic manner, and it won't just be an option of jail or go home. It has to be somewhere in between there. So that's one of the things that I've always been stressing upon prosecutors is, look, on the misdemeanor level, because this is where this goes, is the one big area where you really make a difference in people's lives is that domestic violence case. That can make a difference not only of that family that lives right there, but even long term. But you can't do that right now when we inundate it with minor traffic, and then you inundate it with your possession of marijuana cases, and you're trying to do all of those, and so your DV cases kind of just get thrown through the system. We need to have something where we can concentrate on that. And of course, obviously from a fairness standpoint, you know, does this really fit to have a misdemeanor conviction or even a felony conviction when you start talking about possession, or any type of conviction on your record? You know, that is something when you go get ready to go to college that a person sees that. Does the crime actually fit the punishment? A lot of persons get caught up, well, they don't go to jail. That's not really the point, because you can almost be in your own personal jail because of all the ancillary consequences that happen by having that on your record.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's why I kind of stressed it and kind of got interested in it as a prosecutor, of course, once again, as the state senate continued.
Right. And I want to just step back a couple of years, and Sharon, who's standing back there watching, invited me up, told me I needed to come up to the press conference for the first time you submitted a marijuana bill. And it was any amount of marijuana in the state of Georgia was a misdemeanor as long as you couldn't associate it with a sales case. And I thought to myself, now again, I'm thinking as a cop, you know, and I thought to myself at that point in time, well, that ain't never gonna fly. But what it did was it opened a conversation, okay? And I just want to thank you for doing that, okay? Yeah, sure do.
But you know, that's, you know, it's such an interesting thing when you start talking about that's not going to fly. And what I'm seeing through a legislative process, I think what's critically important, you know, for grassroots drug policy reformers that are on the ground, and I'm sure the senator will affirm this, is that, you know, we as policymakers, we as leaders in what we're doing, I can walk in to a legislator or a staffer and they'll respect my opinion, we'll have great conversations, but when I bring someone with me who's been impacted by the collateral consequences of a cannabis conviction, who lost their federal aid to student loan, or as an adult, because I know this has happened to people, were unable to become foster parents or adopt children. Sure. You know, it's not just about simply a tool for us in law enforcement to try to get a felony stat, because that's what we do with marijuana arrests. It's just, it's our excuse to get into people's pockets in order to get a, you know, great felony stat, which again goes back to what Neill was saying about changing the metrics and the dynamics of how we properly assess good criminal justice and public safety. It's the absence of crime, it's community satisfaction, it's, you know, the implementation of domestic violence programs that really have a great impact, not just today, but on the future of our communities.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I also like to just quickly mention that, you know, we've obviously seen members of Law Enforcement Action Partnership here, LEAP. And I know some of the viewers you know, might be saying, okay, there's a couple of guys here, but there are thousands of us across
Oh, yeah.
the country.
Yeah.
So, and we're not just police officers, we're prosecutors.
Judges.
So I'll talk to you later, but.
Yeah.
So we're
He already has a
prosecutors.
lead pen, I think.
Yeah, we're-
Yeah, no, he's gonna get pinched.
We're judges, we're corrections officials, parole and probation, anyone that has anything to do from first contact with a citizen, being police, all the way through the justice system, through our courts, all the way through to parole and probation, who can speak firsthand about, you know, problematic drug policies, the war on drugs, and the harm that these policies have in our communities when we go about enforcing them, especially when we go about enforcing them in an improper way, in an unconstitutional way.
Yeah.
So, and the reason we don't have, you know, 500,000 members, and we're international around the globe, is because they haven't heard about us yet.
Yeah,
So, I'm gonna get my pitch in.
go ahead. Feel free. Yeah.
Lawenforcementaction.org, lawenforcementaction.org, and they should check us out, especially if you're in any one of those groups that I mentioned.
Yeah, and I'm a member, have been for a while, and I encourage every law enforcement officer that I run into to check you guys out, check us out, because, you know, it's, one of the other questions that's come, it's a great thing, it really is, and it's, had I not gotten involved in this, I'd be more active with you guys, you know,
Right.
so, but right now I've got a job to do in Georgia. I say that it is my mission. I have made it my mission to end cannabis prohibition in the state of Georgia. And so that's what I'm focused on.
Find
But-
your sweet spot,
Yeah.
and that's where you work.
Yeah.
That's how we do it.
That's right. So, but I just want to say that we at Peachtree NORML, of course, we advocate for the freedom to be able to make a responsible adult decision about whether or not to use marijuana, okay? And it's from the medical standpoint, from the medicine standpoint, is what I'm trying to say, from the law enforcement standpoint, you know, from the recreational standpoint, whatever it is, you know. I'm living proof. I've gotten off of 9 different pharmaceutical medicines that the VA had me on through the use of cannabis, and now the only thing I use is the oils, and yeah, I smokes me a little bit out of it too, okay? But I do it in the privacy of my house, or I do it in the privacy of someone else's house that I'm a guest at. You know, I'm not out there in the streets doing that, so responsible is the key word in all of that. And I'd really like to go into how this law and how this affects juveniles, okay, and their introduction into Georgia's gladiator system, which is called the juvenile justice system.
Yeah.
But that's another conversation. We don't have time for that. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out and,
Most welcome.
you know, taking
Thank you, Tom.
part in this. And I'm not a good narrator or host or whatever. But,
Great job.
Are you ready for questions from the audience?
Questions from the audience, maybe?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
I would like to ask each of you, except for of course Tom, what will it take for citizens to go and talk to their city council about deprioritizing marijuana arrests? Is that as effective as changing the law?
I'll speak to that. My sister would not go and talk to a politician, any elected official, until her youngest daughter graduated from high school, because she was afraid that if she said we should change our marijuana laws, our drug laws, that Child Protective Services was going to be knocking on her door saying, so you're giving your kid marijuana, you're giving your kid heroin, and she'd be in a world of hurt. So she only spoke out after graduation. I would just like to say to the people out there, from what I know, I have never heard in an entire country of 300 million people, anybody ever hurt by that type of scenario. So it is safe to contact your politicians. It is safe to speak truth to power and speak as a parent about why you want these laws changed. And a parent is probably the most effective voice, especially talking to an elected official. They listen.
Thank you.
for me, just real quick on that, two points. Number one, young people make not so wise decisions from time to time. And not one young person should ever end up in our juvenile justice system because they try marijuana.
Right.
Okay, it just makes no sense. If there is a gateway, but we know it's not, you know, as far as people think it is, because it's never been proven, not one study. The only gateway that exists is a gateway for our young people into the criminal justice system.
Right.
That's guaranteed. And the second thing is this, and I think you mentioned responsible use. If you want responsible use, because I don't know if you realize it yet, but you're going to have use. We've had use for centuries using this plant. If you want responsible use, you've got to have policies. You've got to have a regulated market and policies that promote responsible use. Prohibition promotes and encourages and ensures irresponsible use at every level.
Yeah.
But certainly you want to get in contact with your elected official. That's very important. And so even though it's not on the city council level, I'm talking about from the state level, yes, please do that. As we mentioned, the bill that we presented last year, at least get through judiciary, that's a big step. And that means it had to go bipartisan. If you know anything about Georgia, it's a red state, so it means we had to get some Republican votes to get that done. And that comes to a lot of work that was done on the ground, and we just need to keep moving forward on that. But definitely, please contact your elected officials because we do respond to that, and we actually want to hear from everybody.
I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. Are you saying for deprioritization or decrim?
Well, and let's all issues, really.
All
Quite frankly,
issues.
all issues. Now, because you're also dealing with it a little bit different, because when we say deprioritization, that would be more of a city council because they have chief of police. When you're in a consolidated county, which is going to be more important for us, for like Augusta, it's going to be more of the, what we call decrim, even though it's not a true decriminalization. But certainly that's what will help persons like in Richmond County and places like that, the consolidated counties. So it gets kind of complicated, especially in a place like Georgia. The bottom line is, please talk to your elected officials.
Yes.
And I think one of the best and most important things that I would suggest to people who are grassroots activists, who are moms and dads who care about this issue, you know, it doesn't matter who it is you, number one, need to build coalitions. In the last, since 2010, and I've been involved in cannabis legalization in California, and I was the spokesperson for Proposition 64 last year. And I think one of the most effective things is to encourage people to engage with their elected officials. And I think all of us are apathetic to that process because we don't like to sit through Board of Supervisors meetings. We don't like to sit through committee hearings. I hated going to city council meetings because they were forever, you know, as a staffer. But what I did learn is the folks who take the time to attend, even if it's a simple phone call to your legislator, even if it's an email to a staffer, every one of those means of communication is valued and needed. So you have to have people that are willing to stand in front of those cameras. You have to have people that are willing to call, to write letters, to write op-ed pieces, to write emails. Don't be apathetic, because this is our country, our laws, it's our taxpayer dollars that we should be responsible for. You know, we entrust our elected officials and our police chiefs and other people to take care of it, but we should have oversight of it.
And although Tom said he knew that it wouldn't go anywhere about any amount of marijuana, no, that's not actually unusual. A lot of states actually do not prosecute felony possession of marijuana, possession only.
Right.
And one of the examples that I would give, among many, is so if a person has in Georgia at least just over an ounce, just a little bit over an ounce, they get a felony, and then that person loses the right to vote, they lose the opportunity to get a Hope Scholarship, they lose a federal loan.
That's right.
But yet, if that same person has a fifth of Jack Daniels and a gallon of vodka and a 24-ounce beer, and he has that ready to go out that night, there's no charge at all.
Right.
That just makes absolutely no sense at all. And so, and also, these are one of the, this particular crime here is the one that we actually go find persons.
Yep.
Persons say, well, how about, what if they're driving and they're high? We have laws for that. We have
That's right.
DUI laws
That's
for
right,
that.
we do.
This is one of the few times we actually actively go find persons. We don't go find shoplifters. They find law enforcement because we see them doing it.
Right.
They're hurting somebody. If we're talking about domestic violence,
Yep.
they're hurting somebody. We don't just come in your house and say, hey, what's going on in here? You call the
I smell
police to
domestic
find out
violence.
what happens. You call
I
them.
smell domestic violence.
But this is the one thing where we actually go find persons and then actually have them get felonies and things of that nature. So, although we know that it might, we're going to stay where we are right now as far as not decrim, but as far as dealing with misdemeanor marijuana. But let me tell you, I still have not given up on the fact that we could actually not have possession only
Right.
felony. That is a very draconian kind of
It is.
punishment that we
I
have.
agree with you.
Let me segue off that, just say, when an officer takes a citizen to jail and spends that time, it does not improve public safety,
Right.
it detracts. That officer's out of their district, so when there is a domestic violence or any type of serious crime, the officer's out of position and the response time is longer. And we know from 100 years of experience here that even a couple of minutes can mean the difference between injury or death. We should be out there ready to go for your 911 call, and that's why Atlanta officers should respect the will of the people, the council, and stay out there ready for that 911 call.
And back to your question, Ted, just very quickly. You know, we put together our own little poll, our own little social media poll, and we've done some good polls. I mean, we've done some legal polls and knew that and we already know that the support is there for it. But once Atlanta produced this or approved this ordinance, we put it out and asked folks to ask the question on their local public forum, social media public forums. And they've done it all over the state. I got requests for a little meme that I worked up, you know, should your city do it? And I sent them out pretty much all over the state, all four corners of the state. And the overwhelming response is yes. It's at 92%, just a little over 92% of people that are answering that question. And just as a last thing here.
We have one little question.
Okay.
I just want to talk about the Atlanta decrim
okay.
and the way the police will respond to it. I often think that when police say we don't make the laws, we just enforce them, it's about as sincere as the head shop owner that says the bongs are for tobacco use only. But is there a plan B? If the plan A of getting leadership to make sure the officers don't go after that on a state level fails, is there a plan B mechanism to keep the prosecutors from taking those cases from Atlanta?
Well, we'll let the prosecutor kind of speak to that. And
The
we did
option.
discuss that a little while ago.
So we
so.
kind of discussed it. I would think, quite frankly, that you're not going to need a plan B, because the fact is, if the prosecutor's office, when I was a solicitor, if I've already got the metrics from my office and I'm not used to getting another 1,000 marijuana cases, I'm not going to be trying to take on that many cases and then trying to hire more prosecutors to prosecute that. I think you'll find that there's going to be a synergy there, and basically the way it's supposed to be done will be done that way, because you'll just be adding more work to the solicitor's office, and they don't need that. They don't want that. They're trying to do the best they can for the community, and so they don't want to add another 1,000 cases, have to go to the city council, the county commission, and say we need another prosecutor, just prosecute misdemeanor violations for marijuana. If they need another prosecutor, it may be for DUI cases, it may be for domestic violence cases. Those are things that need another prosecutors for, so I don't think you'll find it's going to be a major problem.
So like a political pressure from that side of it coming down on the police themselves to not go after it on the
Right,
state
we
level.
don't need your cases kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm in contact with the Fulton County State Court, which is where these would go. They're not real crazy about the idea of 1,200 more cases every year. I can promise you that. So, you know, and there again, you know, this is an evolving process, and this is something that I have tried to put out there to everybody. This will evolve. And it's going to be a matter of establishing SOPs,
Yep.
you know, establishing the policy. And our time is up, but I want to thank each and every one of you for coming and taking and participating in this. It's good to finally, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
I always thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right.